Hey folks, welcome to the Unsung podcast.
It's a podcast. Intros part 2. New feature.
Yeah, new feature. We're loving it so far. I am Mark Fraser. That is Christopher Cusack. That is Vicky. Surname redacted.
Leopard print lanyard. Henry.
You're not going to get that till the end of the episode, but see when it comes in, you're going to fucking love it.
Continuity is the key to humour.
So let's get into it, man.
Picking up where we left off last week. Right, who's next?
I'll go next because we're talking about working class, and the album that I picked is very much a working class record from the American point of view. It's Americana by the Offspring. Now, I don't want to talk too much about this because we did on our pop punk episode. Yeah, I mean, I have very mixed feelings on this record now that I'm older, and I will talk more about that than the actual album itself.
Right, yeah.
I got this when I was 12. It was the first album I ever remember asking for, and my dad bought it for me because I was 12, didn't have any fucking money. I was just in secondary school. And I heard Pretty Fly for a White Guy on the radio, and I have now come to realise as I've grown older that song was made for people like that age to get into music, right?
Which is fucking tragic.
Yeah, really, really bad.
But he fakes it anyway. He may not have a clue and he may not have style, but everything he lacks, well, he makes up in denial. So don't take faith, play us straight. You know he really does.
This weird white boy Latino rap reggae rock. It's a horrible song.
This is like yeah, so this is the point where the Offspring went bad for me, right? I mean, because Ixnay fans were good and Americana fans are bozos, right? Because until then they were a slightly derivative kind of like earnest sort of grunge punk band.
But I don't know, like in Ixnay and the Hombre, they had Motown, which is all about buying weed, and then there was another song which was about something ridiculous as well.
Yeah, but they didn't have the same
buffoonery.
You know, they had Don't Pick It Up, I guess, on Ixnay.
Totally,
was pretty silly, but it wasn't like their lead single. Do you know what I mean? And Smash was that kind of somewhere between Nirvana and Green Day sort of earnest punk thing. This was when they were sort of, was it American Pie and all those daft...
Jackass, blah, 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 all that shit, yeah.
I mean,
Euro Trip and Dude, Where's My Car, and that whole culture of like...
Wet Hot American Summer.
Gonzo American...
I think this album was written
culture.
and recorded and released before American Pie, and definitely before Jackass. Jackass
it was definitely before Jackass.
Yeah, because this was 98.
Yeah, and I was 12 when it came out. I used to I played this CD so much that I actually warped. It was the only CD I had for a long fucking time, right?
Really?
And the singles on it.
That's brain damage, man.
I was 12 years old. Like, I didn't know anything else. You know, I think I must have probably got a few Crying mix. I was reading Crying about that time as well, so I probably did have some cover mounts, but I don't remember any of them. The singles on it are garbage. Like, She's Got Issues was one of them, which is just a shit song.
They're not garbage.
Why Don't You Get a Job is literally the same chord progression and melody as Obadi Obadi by the Beatles.
Aye, totally. But
I won't pay ya, no way. Nah, why don't you get a job? Say no way, yeah, no way.
the Kids Aren't Alright's a good song.
I keep forgetting that was a single because it wasn't a single when I first got it, so I never associated it with being a single.
Because that song to me totally refers back to the earlier
it's
stuff.
It's SoCal punk.
Yeah,
know?
and it's also got that kind of earnest, angsty thing that stuff off Smash especially had. It's the riff in it sounds a wee bit like Blondie as well. That always
How old are these gentlemen by this point?
Too old.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like,
but I mean, if you like Offspring, The Kids Aren't Alright works really well for Offspring. Okay, it is still aimed at kids and singing about kids and stuff like that, but it does what Offspring were pretty good at without being a fucking outright, joke.
Yeah, I mean, because one of the things that attracted me to this album when I was young was the darkness of it, and there's a lot of dark songs on it. Dark, relatively speaking.
I think this album is a fucking like fart joke, man. I don't get the darkness at all.
Like Have You Ever is pure SoCal pop punk. It's got that like minor key. The whole album's about unhappy lifestyles in America.
Can I see since you've mentioned it as well, Have You Ever for me is such a poor opening song for an album. It starts pitchy, it stays pitchy, singing is fucking terrible. His voice has always been like that, yeah. No, but I mean it's nowhere near as good as almost anything on Ixnay. I mean, I do think, as much as I think this album's not good, I think it gets a lot better than Have You Ever. I do not understand.
It does.
I don't understand why that was an opening track.
The end of the line is kind of them returning to an idea that was on, that they did in Ex Nihilo Hombre, but better on that album. Americana was a really good song, but just because the lyrics are a bit puerile and it doesn't really click with me anymore. But Walla Walla is all about being in prison and stuff like that. So that's pretty interesting. Hey, Walla Walla is the name of a prison in America.
Is it?
Yeah.
And what were they saying about it?
I can't remember because I didn't actually listen to the record. I didn't want to listen to that.
I want to know what the Offspring have to say about the penal system in America.
And then now that I reflect on it, Pay the Man's probably the most interesting song because it does something a bit interesting. It's got some Eastern scales. They're exploring some different ideas.
The Eastern scales were something they already did.
Yeah, but like they went full on like psychedelic with it. You know, it was pretty cool. Does this album hold up today? Nah, absolutely not. This band might have been influential, but I think it was only because of place and time, not because of the actual music. I don't think a lot of the music in this album stands up compared to Smash.
Exactly.
Right? It really doesn't.
I think the Offspring are a really important gateway band. I think we said that in the pop punk episode. They are a really useful band. Like Smash and the melodic structures of some of it, even though it was a bit overwrought, was still useful for giving you ideas about where you wanted to go, and it was Smash that got me into Bad Religion. I don't think Offspring were ever the world's most credible band. I just think this was the album that cemented them as like annoying fartcore a bit and made people like Henry Rollins just go to war against them, you know.
What I remember of them, or maybe what their value is a bit like you say, they're an important gateway band until kind of the late 90s, after you had stuff like this. You didn't really see wee skater guys jumping about in, like, you know, that shirt that was ubiquitous that everybody had with the flames going up. But
oh my god,
the bands, whatever. After these kind of albums come out, you started to see wee guys cutting about that were into this kind of music, that had the bleached blonde spiky hair or whatever. Yeah. It was actually important for getting a lot of those young kids into a subculture that was like more
coalesced around this and a couple of other bands. It's true.
Yeah, I mean, this was the first album I ever bought, and it paved the way for me to get it. It was a gateway record that got me into other punk records, which I prefer way more than this. I never revisit this album. I never revisit this band. I guess it's a cool first album for a 12-year-old to have, but on the whole, I think
it's pitched just about right as a 12-year-old album. That's
definitely
the thing about this album. It's like, if you're 12 years old and you're into it, that's fine. I knew plenty of people that were a lot older than 12 that were into this album, and that wasn't fine.
Were they married?
No anymore.
That cover art is like the Melvins.
It is. I think it looks like the same artist as the one that did Electro Retard.
Vicky.
Okay, so the album that I've picked here, it's not really an album, it's a soundtrack to a film. It's the soundtrack to My Girl.
I've got sunshine on a cloudy day. When it's cold outside,
That was the first record you bought? Or, I mean, thereabouts, like you specifically sought it out?
So, like, I think it's the first one that I spent my own money on. I remember I got money for my birthday and I spent it on the soundtrack. I absolutely loved the film. This film, for me, I mean, my profile picture on Twitter is the main character out of My Girl. It's a really
and I look like Macaulay Culkin.
You look like Macaulay Culkin, yes. Very good, right.
Oh my god, it all makes sense.
My Girl is like really a massively like formative film for me. Like it was such a big deal to me as a child, and as I got older I never stopped loving it, right? It's so I try to think why. I mean, the reason at the beginning that I was really into My Girl was because I loved Macaulay Culkin. Obviously, Macaulay Culkin was hot shit at that time, right? But it was also, it had this female protagonist. It had storylines that were more interesting than most kids' films, to be honest, right? You know, it's about a girl whose mum's died. She lives with her dad in a funeral home, and Jamie Lee Curtis is this kind of like hippie that comes into the she is kind of free kind of hippie woman that comes in, and she's grown up and making friendships with boys, and she's starting to think about it. She gets her first kiss, and then her best pal dies. There's a lot in there for a kid's film, right? So it just really touched a nerve. And one of the main things that I loved about it was just its whole 1970s aesthetic. I think it was set in 1972.
Yeah.
Came out in 1991, and I'm 7 at the time. So that soundtrack, I used to play that all the time. It was on CD. I remember playing it on the CD player before I went to school in the morning, every single day, like listening to it and loving it. It's got stuff like Creedence Clearwater Revival on it. I mean, on the actual CD it's Bad Moon Rising, but in the film as well, Run Through the Jungle is in the film as well.
Okay.
So it's got that genre of music for the 70s. It's got stuff for the 60s and that in it as well. It's got the Flamingos, I Only Have Eyes for You, which I absolutely love. It's got Sly and the Family Stone. That song, that Sly and the Family Stone song that's on it, is Hot Fun in the Summertime, and actually the Beach Boys covered it on that that Summer in Paradise album.
Was that the one that was deleted?
Aye.
Yeah.
The Beach Boys' best record. Yeah, you know, it was interesting because when you nominated this one, I was like, I wonder how much that had to just do with just simply loving the film and wanting to own that. It's fascinating because this is, you know, decontextualized. If this was just a mixtape, it would sound like the mixtape of like a 50-year-old person. I don't mean that as a criticism.
No.
There are albums you could play incessantly as a kid that would go a lot worse in your parents' eyes than this, because this is the kind of thing that I'm sure they could be like, that's actually, I fucking love these songs, you know. Whereas if you're putting on Americana every day before school,
my mum fucking hated that. So.
Clearly a lot of this was to do with just loving the aesthetic of the film, but I was surrounded by hundreds of 60s music when I was wee. It was my parents, you know, so my parents are, I suppose, just a bit older, like, because I'm the youngest, you know what I mean, so they're a bit older, and this was just music that I probably listened to a lot, but I think it helped really cultivate my taste in music quite a lot, and the things that I went on to enjoy, you know, a lot of the 60s and 70s stuff that I absolutely loved when I was a teenager, you can see the seed of that in this kind of stuff. So it had like Manfred Mann on it as well, Do a Diddy.
there she was, just walking down the street singing. Snapping her fingers and shuffling her feet singing.
See the song Good Lovin' by the Rascals? I think I must have heard that song about 50 million times. I still put it on playlists. Like even like recently in the last few months, I've put that on a playlist to listen to. I love that film. I think it's a great film for a young person to watch. I think it's, to use one of your favourite terms, Chris, more nutritious than other offerings possibly.
Yeah.
But
we're talking about a lot of kind of gateway albums here, and it's interesting that a lot of the gateway albums we've mentioned are albums that led forwards, whereas this is an album that's actually a gateway into the music of the past for young people, because the music of the past can seem, especially when you're young, already very old hat and sort of like, well, I don't want to get into what my parents listen to, I want to have my own tastes. Whereas it's fascinating that this was, for a lot of people, I would suggest, an album that allowed them to really engage with a huge library of music that already existed, especially stuff like Motown, you know, and the troves of stuff they could dig into. Seeing as we're sharing, can I just say something? I've never seen My Girl. And I think that must put me in single digits in the planet now.
Yeah, probably.
It's awesome.
It's a good film, man. It's a good film.
Is it not weird though that as a kid you loved this album, and yet surely, especially because of the film, it was associated with such a melancholy ending? I always, even though I've not seen My Girl, I understand it to be a film that is a kids' film, but it's very sad.
Do you know what I think it is, right? And I think this is, I mean, I'm not the first person to comment on this, right? I'm pretty sure. I remember seeing a conversation between Courtney Love and Kurt Cobain where she explains to him that the objects a girl's desires is much more complex than a boy fancying a girl. It's all about imagination and getting into like imaginary relationships in your heads with people, and, you know, having this complete inner world. You know, the part of that, I think, is what was going on with me in this. I had a complete inner world about being in that film, or, you know, being connected to the characters in some way, or the storyline, and that soundtrack was just kind of part of keeping that going in my everyday life.
Exactly, it draws you into that. Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, can I just say as well, I didn't really think about it, but that I probably felt the same about the fucking Transformers movies.
Love it.
It allowed me to just, you know, pretend I was like, was it young Sam in that, the one that never leave Optimus?
I can't even remember, mate.
I mean, I'm sure I had lots of really innocent fantasies about Macaulay Culkin coming to my house in Bells Hill and picking me up in my limo and stuff like that.
I was the same with Optimus Prime.
I mean, everybody wanted to be fucking picked up in the Optimus Prime truck and then transformed and just like fucking looking over the world.
I think I was a wee bit kind of like perv, because I liked Ultra Magnus. Nobody liked Ultra Magnus.
I can't remember Ultra Magnus.
I bought Ultra Magnus. I mean, Ultra Magnus was Uncharted.
I don't understand this conversation.
That's a different podcast. But there's at least 2 listeners nodding like fuck right now, and we're going to start a band.
I think because of the analogue nature of all the songs on this record being from the 1670s, it feels like a warm hug, you know. And the film does feel a bit like a warm hug for most of it as well. It's got that.
And then a funeral.
Well, it's got that kind of soft focus, hazy, dreamy feel to it, you know, because it's set in an idealised version of the early 70s. It's
got a total Ron Howard vibe to it, even though it wasn't. It's got that sort of like timeless Happy Days film decks, set wide period piece, recent history, nostalgia thing. You know, what was that show with Kevin Arnold?
Oh, the Wonder Years.
The Wonder Years.
Yeah, exactly the same kind of vibe for sure. It's just chock full of bangers. There's not really much to say about it. All the songs are really good on it. I listened to this again on the way over, and it just makes me smile. And
you can't fuck with it. It's timeless.
It's like totally timeless. It's just completely timeless. The only thing that kind of stuck out to me is like, if you don't know me by now,
If you don't know now, you will never know. You'll never know me.
anytime you hear that song,
Ricky Gervais,
I hear Simply Red, because my mum fucking like loved that. She had that album that this was on, and she used to play it all the fucking time. So I always hear fucking Mick Hucknall.
No, I hear
that is disgusting.
What was Ricky Gervais's character in The Office? David Brent. He does a cover of it in The Office. That he releases a single, and he makes a video, and he's got like the white shirt and the white linen trousers on, and he's like lying singing it and looking out at like a curtained window, and you're just that's what I think about. I do tend to skip that one, if I'm honest. honest.
And Bad Moon Rising, it reminds me of Vietnam. It doesn't.
Run Through the Jungle was more Vietnam.
I
fucking love Creedence.
Run Through the Jungle, I prefer. I remember as a Wayne, like I say, like Run Through the Jungle isn't on the album, and I would be like, what is that song? For years and years and years I was like, well, I need to really find out what that song is. And then I remember like being in university or something like that by the time that I found out what it was. And so there you go.
Alright, well, third category, Mark, you're going first.
Yeah, so
now, by the way, the third category, we should say, we kind of left it a little bit open, so you can pick something that would apply to any of the two previous ones, or just some kind of outlier, some record from the deep, dark, distant past that was particularly notable.
So the reason I picked this Nirvana, never mind. The reason I picked this album was because
I don't know if I've heard of that.
Because of the story behind it for me. So I first heard Smells Like Teen Spirit when I seen two boys, one by the name of Richard Duffy, one by the name of Stephen Mallon, miming Smells Like Teen Spirit on the stage. And I remember hearing that guitar riff and being like, to my pal, I was like, what the fuck is that? And he was like, that's Nirvana, I've not heard that. I was like, no. And then some guy in my year who was selling CDRs like sold me a £3 copy of the record. And after I got that, somebody in my family, I can't remember who, somebody really unexpected, or someone I didn't think was into music, gave me a copy of Bleach. I don't know why they had it. They didn't like it. They gave it to me, and I was like, what the fuck, this is not Nirvana, what the fuck is this? And then I started to get really into Slipknot and Korn and stuff like that.
Can I just say, I think a lot of people got into Nevermind and thought, oh, like my sister for example, and then thought, right, I'll try some other albums, and then they got Bleach and they were like, no.
It's not for me.
It's not for me.
The thing is, this album is quite caustic in places.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Totally is,
the singles maybe aren't in hindsight, but some of the tunes are.
Definitely.
I think that's the reason. So I ended up trading this CDR for an actual, like, a legitimate real copy of the Slipknot, a self-titled record, right? And that got me into heavy music. It got me into like metal and stuff like that. But in my teenage head, there wasn't very much difference between those two. There are obviously a huge difference, right? But you're right, it had gnarly bits in Nevermind, and Slipknot were the gnarliest band that I heard ever, you know.
But I think lots of people were buying Nevermind and listening to the singles and no bothering with the album tracks. Maybe
to back that up, Smells Like Teen Spirit has 1.2 billion. That's billion with a B plays on Spotify. So that kind of goes to back up the entire argument that people just bought it because it's a long record. It's almost 50 minutes long, so it's a long album as well.
Not for the era though.
Yeah, I mean, but if you're just looking for the two singles, it's a long fucking record to sit through.
I have to be honest, Vicky, you probably know I quite like Nirvana.
Christ, we used to walk through Stirling and people would shout, Kurt Cobain!
Right. But I was never that huge a fan of Smells Like Teen Spirit. Like, it was the other tracks on this album. I mean, even from the singles.
It Smells Like Teen Spirit.
5 minutes long, it's 5 minutes 18 as well. Even it's fucking long, man.
Yeah, at the time it was a long single, but you know, even the singles like Lithium and Come As You Are and stuff, I always thought they were more interesting.
I've never liked Come As You Are. I don't like that song, man. I don't know what it is.
Got them in a lot of trouble.
I love In Bloom.
Remember
the other
Courtney gave them that riff,
said
and then
she wrote it.
They ended up in court because she'd ripped it off of a Killing Joke track.
Yeah. I mean, what is there to say about this has not already been said?
No.
This entire album is antithetical to everything this podcast stands for. Every capacity.
I tell you what there is that could be said about this album that's never been said. Right, so I first heard Nirvana when I was on a French exchange trip in France when I was about 11 years old. Somebody gave me undercooked steak and I puked it on the bus, and I was the guy who I was on the exchange trip with was a good few years older than me, and even at that age I felt bad because I knew that he'd got somebody that he didn't want on the exchange thing. So I was like just this wee fucking tiny wee guy, and they were all hitting puberty, and I was just this wee tiny pathetic dude, and that guy had like
Macaulay Culkin.
He'd literally, yeah,
fucking get Macaulay Culkin.
He'd got the short straw. So I rocked up.
Exactly.
I rocked up with my Big Country Best Of and was playing that, and he put on this record and I didn't get it, but I remember on a plane.
My mother died every night. Said to say, call me a man. Love myself better than you. Know it's wrong.
Was a track from it that even then I was like, oh, I don't know about this, it's a bit much for me, but that one's really working, you know. And I remembered that a couple of years later when a guy called Alan Douglas burst my football. I don't remember how it happened. I think he kicked it into the middle of some bushes. And
Rab Douglas's son.
Sorry?
Rab Douglas's son.
No, I was too ginger. But Alan burst my ball, and then he wasn't repentant at all. And I was like, how can you not be repentant? That man's football is like really, really personal thing. And so I pretended like that was fine, but then I bided my time, and then when I was in his house I nicked his copy of Nevermind, and to this day that's still the copy of Nevermind I've got. I've taken good care of it.
Wow.
But I will say, even though that was dishonest, and he can use this against me, his brother, I recall his older brother had like loads of Guns N' Roses and Iron Maiden posters, so Kurt would have approved of me you know, rescuing that CD from that household. But
Okay, you've justified that in your head.
yeah, absolutely. I've spent a long time trying to put that excuse in order.
Chris, I've got a surprise for you.
Here tonight.
See you tonight.
No, I mean there's lots of interesting things about this album. There's interesting things like the Butch Vig version of it. The original version, it was a lot more caustic. The fact that it was sent away to Andy Wallace and he compressed and polished the shit out of it. I think the notion, like we were saying about Definitely Maybe, the fact that for me the secret to Nevermind is that the album tracks are so good. It's not the singles, because the singles are utterly burnt out for me, but to this day I think Lounge Act is the most perfect bit of alternative rock written.
Right, I like Trade News, my favourite.
With eyes to die, you laid it out, become your pupil. You taught me everything about a poison apple.
Drain You is-
Drain You is another great one. Like those album tracks in this are like Breed
and Territorial Persons are like tied for my favourite song on this record.
absolutely fucking tremendous, right? So the album had a lot going for it beyond just those singles, which is what a lot of these other ones maybe didn't, you know, and that gave it a longevity, because once you were bored of these overplayed things you could still go back to it.
I can't listen to Nevermind. I tried to listen to it recently. I can't. I'm like skip, I can't.
I think Nevermind serves an interesting function though in Kurt's image that he liked to project, right? Because Kurt always sort of pretended he didn't like this. Like, Kurt was obviously a punk rocker, and you know, Bleach, as you say, is obviously really heavy, and then In Utero went in a direction where it was very caustic with Steve Albini. But even within that Albini thing, when they got Scott Litt in, for example, to remix I think is it Pennyroyal Tea that he did, those little tendencies I think betrayed the fact that Kurt Cobain liked to give the impression that he hated these commercial things, but actually he was really pretty proud of them. And
clearly
what he needed was the ability to outwardly say, oh well, here's this incredible pop album I've written, oh my god, it's so goddamn slick, I hate it. But it went out there and made him really fucking famous, and then he was able to keep writing incredibly poppy things that he could then say he hated, and then mix them, intersperse them with these much more caustic things that he could sort of say, oh, that's much more my kind of thing. But he was ultimately a big contradiction of a guy.
He loved the Beatles, he loved John Lennon, he loved that kind of music,
but
you know.
You know what, I think we're talking about the legacy of these albums to them, and I'm sorry I've hijacked this one, Mark, but it is Nirvana, so fuck you. Look at my wardrobe, it's full of check shirts, right?
From 1991.
Yeah, literally. I think the key purpose though this served for me from a very early stage was that it made me initially question, like, what is this? This guy seems to love writing these kind of songs, but then he tells everybody he hates them. And then there were so many things that began to not ring true about Kurt Cobain's lifestyle and his personality, his drug use, and, you know, some of the things he said and some of the ways he behaved, and the fact that he didn't seem like a very good father, even though he loved his daughter. And see, as a young guy, see, learning that kind of nuance, it taught me really early on, don't deify anybody. Like I loved Nirvana, and I was absolutely infatuated with Kurt Cobain to the point where I remember trying to like mentally make myself stop growing so I could stay the same height as him. You know what I mean? It's that level of like fixation. But
that's probably what he did. They quite make it to 6 feet.
I know, it's fucking murdery. If only I could go back and unthink their thoughts. But honestly, like, it was a really, really useful life lesson for me. Not maybe the life lesson that a lot of people took, or that was intended by Nirvana, you know, because there were a lot of other more obvious lessons about tolerance for LGBTQ lifestyles and all that kind of thing. But I think learning not to deify anybody was vital, and Kurt Cobain was the perfect fucking lesson in that. He was great for that, because he seems like a fundamentally lovely, complex, petty, petulant, grumpy, incredibly talented, engaging, funny, introverted guy. He's so complicated, and absolutely, like, never mind, as much as I don't listen to it hardly ever now, with the exception of the odd tune on a playlist like the ones you're talking about, Vicky, I will always take the lesson that I got about Kurt Cobain from that, and the fact that no matter how much you admire someone, keep their flaws in perspective, and just keep that in your mind.
Yeah, fair point.
I mean, one of the other reasons I wanted to bring this up was because I think it would be remiss for us not to bring up a Nirvana record in this kind of episode, because most of the people listening are going to be influenced by this band, or by bands that were influenced by this band.
Definitely.
You know, it's the like, much like Oasis, they're a culture unto themselves. They're not a cultural phenomenon, they are the culture, you know what I mean? And for me, I listened to this earlier on because I made the notes, and I didn't even need to listen to it. I was like, I should probably listen to it. And the remaster is actually really good. It sounds great. I
don't know if I've heard the remaster.
It came out in 2011, so it's been out for a while. And it made me start thinking about the whole overproduced argument of it, which was obviously something that Kurt Cobain used to always say. And I think people that don't like this record for that reason are operating in bad faith. I think, you know, that's just part of the appeal of the record. That's why it sold so many fucking copies. You know?
Absolutely.
And you wouldn't be listening to it if it wasn't quote unquote overproduced. And it's just, yeah, and like we've already said, it's chock full of bangers. Like I said, Breed or Territorial Pissons, both quite punky songs, obviously appeal to me quite a lot. Territorial Pissons makes a great hardcore punk song, actually.
There's some good covers.
Yeah, the Comeback Kid version is phenomenal of that, actually. Lithium's really good. Definitely the blueprint for Loud Quiet, this whole record is, you know what I mean? Taken for the Pixies, obviously, but every band's done that.
Yeah,
since, you know.
Like Lithium's also got like an early version of that sort of millennial chorus thing that we do in Scotland, like Twin Atlantic and all that. It's kind of got a precursor to that going on, doesn't it?
Yeah, Loud Jack, you've mentioned that.
Fucking amazing.
Yeah.
End of Life Tonight sold out video, you know, Kurt's dead, that kicks in over the black screen. I've said that before on the show, that just is fucking absolute perfection to me, man. I love it. The way the last time through goes up.
Yeah, exactly, that's what I was going to say. It's really downbeat, and the chorus is the same kind of register, and then it just kicks up, and it's only like less than 3 minutes long as well, which is pretty clever. Something the way is one of my favourite songs, and actually hints towards the direction that would have been in lots of In Utero. Yes, that's great.
Yeah, but except something in the way ties into what I was saying as well about, you know, the false sort of
the
impression
mythology
of the guy. Yeah, because I mean, this whole thing is very disputed whether or not he ever really was homeless and slept under a bridge and stuff. It's like, I know that he's saying that it had to be literal. A lot of people say things in songs that aren't literal, but it was adopted in that way. It was like, oh, you literally did this and you literally did that, and it was like, there's a lot of bullshit around him, and I don't necessarily, a lot of that was his fault, but folk need to just fucking keep the guy in perspective.
People are generally shite at textual analysis when it comes to lyrics and music, aren't they? Like, I mean, a lot of like people getting pissed off, and I'll speak about that when I speak about my thing, just totally misinterpreting stuff and not having no idea about how to read it, you know.
That stuff is also the point where Kurt Cobain started to slide into the same fate as like John Lennon, where people are sort of projecting all these things onto him, and he's acquiring a role in their life that is like, that's not the guy, by the way. That's quite a flawed human being you're talking about. In your head he's somebody completely different, and
it's almost like over-analysing Ace of Base lyrics, isn't it?
Well, let's do a double episode on it and see.
Who's next?
Shall I do mine? Because mine won't be too long.
Yeah,
there you go.
I've never heard this album before.
Really?
I heard the singles, obviously, but never listened to it.
So I've picked Different Class by Pulp.
She came from Greece, she had a thirst for knowledge. She studied sculpture at St. Martin's College. That's where I caught her eye.
I think this album must have come out about 1995, 96. I think in one of the Christmases, 95, 96, my sister had a boyfriend, and
good for her.
Yeah.
How's that going?
They're no longer together. She's moved on.
That's sad. I hope he's alright.
And I think he was trying to endear himself to like our wee sisters and things like that, so we got Christmas presents off him. And
good. He sounds alright.
I thought you were going to say something really, really dark there, and I was like, okay. Just going left quite quickly.
Not on this podcast, man. Right?
He sounds like a decent
maybe
bloke.
do a bonus episode about that.
He sounds like a decent bloke. Right? If somebody's still got his number,
he's probably his jail number.
Is it his pal Alan?
But he got me and my other sister some CDs. I can't remember what Carrie got, but I got Different Class by Pulp and Everything Must Go by the Manic Street Preachers.
Oh,
is that the name of the album?
That's correct. It's a fine record.
Fuck me, man. That's an excuse to get the locks changed.
This is, when I think back, this is so nostalgic for me because I can close my eyes and I know what I was like at the time. I was obsessed with Manu and Ryan Giggs. I was in this like wee bedroom where I just had like my wee Ghetto Blaster CD player, you know, some cheap piece of shit out of
You pop the lid up.
Yes, exactly. And get Christmas time, so like I can remember like sweeties I was eating when I was listening to both of them, you know, and just that whole cultural milieu of Britpop and guitar bands and Spice Girls as well and all of that stuff, you know. So the reason I've picked this one though is just because this is an album that I still actually occasionally listen to, and I absolutely love Jarvis Cocker. Again, it's a bit like the Madonna thing. Part of what you like about him is because he was quite irreverent, and nothing embodies that or nothing exemplifies that better than the whole Brit Awards instant when you get up on stage and he
got that right. It's like
100%.
It's like John Lydon with the Jimmy Savile.
I mean, Michael Jackson, for anybody that's not familiar with this, Michael Jackson was on stage. He received like a kind of lifetime achievement award for the Brit Awards, and he was on stage doing Earth Song, but the choreography was very much like he was this kind of Christ-like figure, and he had all these children in about him, and it was dead self-important and grandiose and all that. And Jarvis Cocker kind of like ran up on stage, lifted up his top to flash his belly button, and then wiggled his arse, his clothed arse at Michael Jackson, and then ran off the stage. Right? I mean, that is the extent of it. And he was detained and questioned by the police. And interestingly, recently I listened to Bob Mortimer's autobiography. Bob Mortimer, before he became a comedian, was actually a qualified lawyer. And Bob Mortimer was there at the Brit Awards ceremony, and some of Pulp were like, Bob, you need to help Jarvis because he's being detained by the police. So like Bob Mortimer temporarily kind of stepped in while he was getting questioned and stuff like that, and was his kind of like representative. Now ultimately they didn't charge him with anything because that's fucking ludicrous if they did, right? But Michael Jackson himself made a massive deal of it. Was like, I'm sickened by this and everything, and it was pure controversial. And Jarvis Cocker was very much like, well, I was a protest against somebody with a messianic complex.
I just think it's really nice that somebody waggled their bum at Michael Jackson. He didn't stick his finger in it.
I have no idea what you're talking about there, Christopher.
Good for Jarvis.
But that's part of what you love about Jarvis Cocker, is he's kind of irreverence and he's quite down to earth. And I know he gets kind of he himself, he gets parodied and lampooned and things like that. I remember that Brass Eye episode with the so Paul, go on that, you twat.
he's a guy that's aged pretty well. I don't mean like aged pretty well physically. I have no idea about that, but I just mean his persona has aged pretty well. Like he walked a line at the time. I can't say I had a great deal of time from then, but in retrospect, he's pretty good. He got it right in a lot of like different things, you know. He's an interesting guy as well. His life story's pretty interesting. You know, his dad abandoned him when he was 7 years old.
I didn't.
Yeah, so,
I don't know much about his biography.
Well, he was, I can't remember, it was like Sheffield or something he was from, and his dad left his family. His dad was a DJ and an actor, and he abandoned them and fucked off to Australia and left his mum to raise him, Jarvis and his sister alone. I think Jarvis and his sister flew over to Australia when he was like 30 and reconnected with the dad. I think he said, I don't hate him, I've forgiven him, I just feel sorry for him, something like that. His dad became like a hippie and lived in a commune. His mum, interestingly, became a Tory councillor. Don't know, I have no idea with that. I mean, it probably tracks, but he's just a really interesting guy. He did a bunch of TV things in the 90s because he was such a compelling personality, you know, very dry and quick-witted. He did a show called Journey into the Outside in the 90s. I think it was on Channel 4, which was him travelling around the world, actually, meeting all these outsider artists, and he's just such a kind of empathetic and sincere take on the art they were creating. He's quite compelling. I mean, as Mark says, we've all heard the singles in this. It's something about this album I don't get. I don't get the running order at all. It seems really strange.
I've never thought about that.
I mean, Misshapes, that first tune in it, is quite well known as a single. There.
Oh, what's the point in being rich if you can't think what to do with it? 'Cause you're so bleeding thick. Oh, we weren't supposed to be. We learned too much at
But the way it kicks off the album just doesn't really make sense for me, and then it got that what's it called, Pencil Skirt, the track after it. It gets so low key and low energy so quickly.
Oh, it's turning me on. Now you can tell some lies about the good times that you've had, but I've kissed your mother twice.
It's not that I think they're bad songs. I don't really have any real feelings on them either way. I just think it's a strangely arranged record.
Yeah, I think I can see what you mean by that, because there is quite a mishmash of songs on this album in terms of like their tempo and things like that. I've never really taken that into consideration, but I definitely see your point. For me, I think why I still listen to this album is because the songs I listen to on it now aren't the ones I was listening to back, you know, when I was a wee 11-year-old. I really love Feeling Called Love.
Feeling cold love. Why me? Why you? Why here?
And that was definitely one that I would have skipped when I was younger.
Yeah.
Something changed as well.
Your friend. Life could have been very different, but then something changed.
Ease and Whiz, I think, is hilarious.
Yeah, absolutely.
And going back to what I was saying about misinterpretation, there was a big campaign by the Daily Mirror because the journalist Kate Thornton, who you probably know, I think she did like X Factor maybe, and she's been on Loose Women, so she had wrote this big thing about how it was encouraging people to take drugs and it was pro-drugs and all that, and it's like, clearly not. It's ripping the piss out of like this kind of superficial, kind of shallow way that people in the drugs community talk to each other, because it's all that, oh, nice one, geezer, and that's as far as the conversation went. You know, it's ripping the piss out.
For foreign listeners, the track's sorted for Ease and Whiz, which is meaning like, oh yeah, I've got
my Ease
ecstasy and
speed,
Whiz, yeah.
So in his response to that as well, it's like you say, he's quite a measured person when he's responding to things, and I don't think he kind of courts controversy, but he doesn't shy away from it. And he was just like, right, well, I actually don't want to be appearing to be encouraging anybody to take drugs or alcohol even, you know, and because I think that initially they had released the single with a kind of instructions for making an origami wrap that you might put powdered drugs inside, so they kind of took that away, get rid of that or whatever. But he was saying, actually, it's not a pro-drug song at all. You've really misinterpreted the lyrics there, and I find all that stuff really tedious, but I like how he responds to it.
Good luck policing pop music for references to drugs.
I know, right? I enjoyed this album. I agree with Chris. The running order is just
strange,
really bizarre. One of the things I really liked about it was Ice Fly, because it's got a total James Bond vibe.
Can't you see a giant walks among you, see through your petty lives? Do you think I do these things for real? I do these things just...
I've got a note of that as well. It's somewhere between James Bond and the music from the song I Need a Hero.
Yeah, totally, absolutely, yeah, totally get that. It's the strings that give it the James Bond feel. It's just so overblown, and that's why I love it so much.
Yeah.
Pencil Skirt is really creepy.
Aye, but that's Jarvis Cocker
cool,
all over the back. That kind of like sexual deviant playing on that. You know, there's loads of references.
It's quite
to
understated
that
though.
stuff.
You know,
it's very understated. Yeah.
This is, it isn't a concept album, is it? But it's very close to being a concept album.
Right,
and
it's close.
It's
to
observing sort of English sort of
class, different class.
Yeah, like upper working versus lower middle class life, and the people that cross that boundary at university, and you know, the song "Common People" obviously being the absolute
epitome of that.
And let's just give credit to how fucking well that song has aged.
Oh yeah,
because that song is still a dance floor filler. I actually probably like that song more now than I ever did at the time.
I'm probably the same, man. Yeah,
yeah. Just my appreciation for what a musical achievement it is, and how well it has aged is only grown.
Yeah.
Alright, so very similar album I've chosen.
Very similar.
Very similar album.
I couldn't believe how similar it was.
Yeah.
First heard it.
Chaos AD by Sepultura.
Chaos AD.
Yeah, this is a strange selection, right?
For you especially.
For me especially, and also because I was 12 when I heard it, right? But it's got such a significance for me, and I mean, the point of this show was to talk about albums that maybe kind of blew the doors open in our little tiny minds when we were younger in one way or another. This literally, probably as much as any other record apart from maybe Nevermind, blew the doors open on my mind. And I wasn't a massive fan of it. I'm still not a massive fan of it. In fact, I've got written here, is this actually good, or is it just a bit of nostalgia? Right? Because my cousin had this. She was a big Guns N' Roses fan, right? And she had this in cassette, and she gave it away with me, and I was like, oh, thank you very much. But my parents didn't know. It was sort of like a covert transaction. She was like, here, by the way, put this in your pocket, get that, didn't you? And so I was like sitting in the back of the car the whole way home going, oh, fucking hope my parents don't frisk me. They better not frisk me, man.
Smuggling contraband here.
And I got in, and I remember peeking at the cover, because one of the things was I was 12 and I was really fascinated by this mummified figure hanging upside down, sort of like wrapped in robotic sort of tendrils and pipes and cables. It had that cyborg morbid sort of metal thing going on, cyber metal graphic thing.
It's really interesting that I think we spoke a little bit about it in the Iron Maiden episode as well. It's like the cover art for a lot of metal albums I think is deliberately designed to engage with a certain kind of like young person.
Yeah, I mean, I was getting into comics, you know, like even
having fever dreams about Transformers and
absolutely, man. I was like, I could be the Mummy, and that could be Optimus's big robotic dick wrapping around me. But the fact that
Daddy Optimus, come get me.
I'm trying to run a podcast here, Vicky. No, you're right. I was getting into comic books, and even some of the kind of more adult comic books, like the kind of 2000 AD stuff, I would keep sort of hidden away, or you know, stashed.
Like Picasso's Guernica.
That's right. But there was
what is that these days, by the way?
So there was a fascination with that aspect of it. And when I got home, I remember going up to my room and sort of checking the coast was clear, and I had again the same mono cassette player, right? All my things were on cassette, right? I remember having it at its lowest possible setting and pressing my ear against it to the extent where nobody else could possibly hear it. But I didn't even want anyone to know I was listening to something this ferocious, because it's not like my family were puritanical, they weren't at all,
No,
you know,
not at all.
but I was really worried that I'd get caught.
You'd have to explain yourself.
Aye. and I actually remember at one point my mum coming up the stairs and I just like totally panicking, you know, and switching it off and sticking it under the bed and trying to, like, there was such a sense of taboo about it, and in hindsight it felt really thrilling. And the music felt really thrilling, and it felt illicit and scary, and I couldn't understand why it was so evil sounding and so ferocious. And I know that all sounds very melodramatic now. I didn't have any older siblings. I was never exposed to anything like that. You know, like Meat Loaf was literally probably the most metal thing I'd ever heard in my life. And so this was like really, it did blow open the doors of my mind, the parameters of what was music. And so I tried to kind of I tried to understand it. I think that's probably the best way to put it. I didn't massively like any of the tunes, but I found some of them really, really interesting. I know that the people that do like Sepultura will note that the Chaos AD album is the album where they moved away from being a thrash band. It's actually their 5th album, which is mad because it was in 93, but they moved away from being a thrash band to being like a kind of groove metal band in a sort of nastier Pantera kind of vein. Not that I knew what any of that stuff was. Refuse, Resist, I remember because of the lyrics more than anything. Territory, I remember really liking the drums at the start of Territory because it had this really interesting percussive pattern.
Some amazing drumming on this, like throughout.
By the way, Igor Cavalera, we've said it before, fucking last time I heard him he was drumming with Soulwax, which I think is fucking amazing. Kiowas I loved on this, the 5th track, which is like that kind of the
acoustic-y sort of thing,
the acoustic thing where they nod back to their Brazilian sort of like ethnic kind of origins. You know, they had a lot of respect for the tribes in Brazil, and they did their best to sort of platform those kind of causes, and it was a theme in a lot of their records. And actually that really stuck with me, that track. I remember trying to do things like it as I was kind of dabbling about with recorders and stuff as I got a bit older. I remember this track Biotech is Godzilla because I was fucking 12 and I was like, I like Godzilla. I don't know what biotech is, but it sounds scary.
Biotech, biotech, biotech is Godzilla.
It was a very thrashy song and also stupid as fuck. I mean, the chorus is like, Biotech is Godzilla. It's fucking daft.
And Chilla Biafra's on that song as well.
Is he?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that. But there you go, that's perfect. I remember the track. It was like, We Who Are Not As Others, I think is the title. Sounded so evil to me then. I was like, why is he so fucking sad? My favourite tune in it was a track called The Hunt, which I didn't actually know at the time, and only cover. Yeah, it was a cover in New Model Army. I actually found that out very, very recently, but
it sounds like a post-punk song they're playing, and it's really bizarre on the record. It doesn't really sit properly.
It doesn't sit properly, but I did find it the most accessible tune, even though it was still heavy. It had a kind of momentum and a driving sort of feel to it that the others didn't. But honestly, I just found this such a fucking interesting record when I was that kid. It really challenged me, and even though I gave my cousin the cassette back. I didn't go out and buy any Sepultura, but it was only a couple of years later, maybe 2 or 3 years later, when I was like getting really into Nine Inch Nails, and then I was getting into stuff like Downset was spoken about, and I was hearing bits and bobs of stuff on the radio, and I remember the Sepultura tape, and I think the vast majority of stuff that I listen to now that's that heavy, would I have ended up listening to it? Maybe I would, but this played as big a role as any in just expanding my mind in terms of what counted as music. You know what I mean? It was amazing.
What do you think of it now?
I think it's pretty good. I mean, I like it. I still like it a lot more than I like anything like Pantera. There's maybe a wee bit of nostalgia attached to that, but I do think it's a remarkably stupid album. Like, I mean, the mentality level of the lyrics is fucking ridiculous, but
it's a second language, to be fair.
Yeah, it is, but it's a fun record. It's good.
I think it's interesting how when you're little and you don't really have clear concepts of music, lyrics, or you're completely in the dark about most of the world, and things like that almost scare you. Like, I remember being really scared of Ozzy Osbourne, like really scared of him, like that's evil. I know obviously I had a Catholic upbringing as well, right, and that no doubt plays into stuff like that, like reading symbols associated with the devil and things like that in a really, really terrifying way. But I think that when you're little as well, your mind just fills in the gaps of the things that you don't understand, and usually fills it in with a lot of shite and superstition and ghosts and fucking goblins and do you know, whatever else. I remember Tubular Bells was in The Exorcist, right? But probably because of the association with that, you know, I've had this total fear round about it, and like this total spine tingling reaction
it
to it.
Having a cult quality to it, no matter like.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of like metal music especially, I remember being quite scared or, you know, freaked out or, you know, really intrigued by what the mystical aura about that was, and obviously in the 80s, it's the height of the whole, what was it called again?
Satanic Panic.
Satanic Panic. So we didn't really stand much of a chance of just being able to embrace some of that stuff as just part of a wider like genre to enjoy. It was
we were
fucking
conditioned
terrifying
to dread it
and hide it.
Yeah. I mean, that impulse is probably what drew me to Slipknot and Marilyn Manson. I mean, something happened to Marilyn Manson recently, I don't know if you heard, but I was brought up.
Turns out he wasn't the upstanding citizen that we all thought he was.
It turns out everything that he said in his book actually did fucking happen, and he's always been a creep. Like, you know, he talks about it in his autobiography in 1997, for fuck's sake. But yeah, I mean, I was brought up Catholic as well, and I used to get forced to go to chapel every Sunday by my dad, who was not a Catholic, and he was divorced from my mum, and he had to take us because mum couldn't go, and it was pure nonsense. But like that, the whole like fuck God and all that, and that was
I can't believe you said that.
Yeah, no, pure catnip to me as a wee guy, and it's why I think it's why I since gravitated towards darker kind of music and like the macabre, basically. And funnily, it's funny that you picked up this record, man, because I heard Roots Bloody Roots on Music Channel, of a music channel, a friend's house.
Can I just say, we're going to be getting things on Twitter going, by the way, that thing about God, that's pretty rude in my opinion.
Yeah, man.
Don't say fuck God.
Don't say fuck. Apologise.
Don't say you're attracted to fucking God.
Sorry, Roots Bloody Roots, Mark. Sorry.
So I seen that in a music TV channel in a friend's house, and I had LimeWire back then, so I did start downloading Sepultura, and the two songs that I got first were Refuse, Resist and Propaganda.
Why take my word? You're so afraid. You think you have the right to put me down? Propaganda.
That was before I'd even downloaded like Roots Bloody Roots. I was just like grabbing anything I could see, and those two songs are like,
and it only took a week to download a tune.
Exactly. Do you know what I mean? And it was those two songs were ingrained in my head, and it just took me, hearing them took me right fucking back to being a guy. It was a really bizarre thing. Like, I completely forgot Propaganda existed, and as soon as the first riff came in, I was like, holy fuck, I remember that song when I was 14 years old. It was just, it was a pure,
that's
like,
a nice feeling.
Yeah, it was a really, was not expecting to get that, you know, because I spent a lot of time thinking about the records that really had influenced me, and coming back to one which is, this just totally came out of nowhere. So I really thank you for that experience. It was really fucking cool.
That's alright.
I'm leaving God to lie, I didn't listen to it.
It's a good.
I mean, I just knew straight off the bat you're going to fucking hate it. And I think if I was coming at it cold, I'd probably have absolutely no attachment to it. It's like when Dave nominated At the Gates, and I was like, man, this is sorry, it's like when Mark nominated At the Gates, even worse. And I was just like, man, I've got no visceral connection to this whatsoever. It's just fine. But that's what this music does if you're not invested in it. But because this has that significance, I can't break that link at all.
Hey guys, so we don't normally do this because, well, it's customary to do your research before you record an episode, but as you just heard, I put my hands up. I did not listen to Chaos AD before we recorded. Well, more fool me, because it's an absolutely fantastic album. I have listened to it since. I've listened to it 3 or 4 times since, and it's a truly amazing find for me. I think the first thing I noticed is that it's not really overly produced in the way that some metal albums can be. It sounds pretty lo-fi in comparison, which I think is quite nice. It has a kind of Melvins-y slowness, which appeals to me. And it doesn't seem cheesy or dated in the way that other albums can be, especially after a period of nearly 30 years have elapsed since this album came out in 1993. I like the way it takes some diversions. It's something that I appreciate. It fits in well with other heavy bands that I like, for example Bosch, who also take diversions into different tempos on their albums. You feel more like you're on a journey. It's more of a variety and more likely to get me to continue listening to a metal album, to be honest. The song Kailash has moments that actually sound like Crosby, Stills and Nash. I can also hear how Sepultura have influenced a lot of bands since then, bands that I've enjoyed. I think people have tried to do this, and my only real critique of the album is that it's too long and it fades a wee bit at the end. I think they could have stopped round about the 40-45 minute mark. But what an absolutely brilliant album to get into as a youngster. Like, that's good quality, and I really wish that I had had it in my life sooner. So thanks for that, Chris, and let's get back to the show.
Well, after listening to this, I categorically tell you that I would take this over Fear Factory any fucking day of the week,
absolutely.
man. And maybe even some Pantera stuff as well. I like Pantera, you know, despite all the fucking things that are wrong with them, which are legion.
I can't believe you just shot down Marilyn Manson here again, Pantera, and almost pass you.
I still listen to Manson as well. I just doesn't necessarily have to like him as a person.
You heard it here first, folks. That's the end of this podcast.
But like, these guys had better riffs because they were a death metal band to begin with. Pantera were a fucking glam metal band.
Certainly were.
You know, these guys knew what they were doing, and they took it down the tribal route, harking back to the roots. And for me, it works so much better than the dunder-headed, rebel flag waving groove metal that Pantera do.
Max is a right on guy. Yeah, he's
totally,
he's one of those metal people. You're like, he's not actually, as far as I'm aware, embarrassed himself yet.
No, and he's getting involved in some. Don't get me wrong, he's getting involved in some dodgy projects over the years, like Soulfly, pretty much.
Maybe he was also in Nail Bomb.
I was in Nail Bomb, yeah, and
which is a pretty fucking good project.
So. And he did Killer Be Killed, which is not a good project. So I mean, he keeps going and he keeps trying different things, which is a lot more than you can say for many artists from that era who do metal music. And I think he is a pretty cool guy, and he's still got his accent, so when he sings it still sounds fucking mental. But I love it. I like this record, man, and it was good to come back to it.
Yeah. Well, that was intros. That was us doing it first, and we're going to try and rope some more people into it. Maybe see, I'm sure Ferro's good. I wonder what the fuck he'll pull out the bag, man. He was the kind of guy that his first record was an obscure 7-inch. Be curious to hear what Dave says as well.
Yeah, it's probably a Korn record,
I think
right?
he still listens to whatever it was.
Yeah, totally, man.
But yeah, hope you enjoyed that. Again, please go and subscribe. Mark, how do people subscribe to this podcast?
Go to our website, unsungpod.net. You can find all of the platforms there. Otherwise, half of our listeners on Spotify, so if you're not subscribed to Spotify already, hit the fucking button, please.
Do some reviews.
And also just share the episodes and share the love to other people, you know.
We've been getting some of that recently. Thanks to our man Kenny Benella for joining the record club, the Unsung Record Club. We've got multiple tiers. You got your basic level, you got your digital level, where we curate albums and send them to you for a small fee every month, and that money goes to help the bands and the kind of independent labels that are putting that music out. And then you get the vinyl club, same thing. We buy direct from the bands and the labels, and they're using that to press and record new stuff, which is quite exciting.
Awesome.
Plus it keeps us in business. It keeps Mark in Marilyn Manson tattoos and Vicky in leopard print
lanyards.
That's me in a nutshell. Leopard print lanyard.
Well, we're not going to tell you what we're doing next week because we don't fucking know. So tune in for that.
See if we can rope anybody into doing this little Kim episode. Failing that, we'll spring something on you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.